Hello, welcome. What I'm doing here is a calculator workshop where I will take you through how to do some of the basic functions on a TI-83 or TI-84 calculator. And then also, it's going to be a series of videos, so then I'll also do some of the more complicated things that these calculators do. Certainly not going to cover everything that these calculators do because they do an awful lot, but just some of the basic things that are most useful in a lot of the math classes. So the calculator I'll be using here is a TI-84 Plus Silver Edition. Now, you don't need to have this exact type of calculator in order to follow along with this. Any TI-83 or TI-84 calculator has the same buttons on it in the same places, and it has all the same functions. So if you have any of those types of calculators, no matter what edition it is, you'll be able to follow along with what we're doing here, and it'll be the same thing on your calculator. If you have a different type of calculator, like a TI-89 or a TI Inspire, or like a different brand altogether that's not a TI, you can still watch this, and a lot of the functions of these calculators are the same, so you'll be able to do a lot of the same stuff. Although if you have a different type of calculator, some of the menus you have to go to in order to find the functions you need might be a little bit different. So you might have to adjust a little bit for those other types of calculators. But in this first video here, we're just going to walk through just some basics of doing basic calculations with a calculator, just kind of an introduction into how to calculate with one of these fancy graphing calculators. All right, so first thing, I put up some examples here, so let me get out of the way so you can actually see the examples. The first one we're going to do is just a pretty basic thing, the square root of 9. All right, so first off, on the calculator, the on button is down here. All right, so that turns my calculator on. Also notice above the on button in blue, on my calculator at least it's blue. If you have a different type of calculator, it might be different color, but it says off. So if I want to turn the calculator off, to get to anything that's in my calculator is blue above the keys, I use the second key up here. So if I do second and then the on button, that turns the calculator off. All right, so let me turn it back on so we can actually do this. All right, so the square root of 9. If you notice on my x squared key here, right, above that is the square root symbol. All right, so to do a square root, I need to use the second button and then the x squared button, right, and that gives me the square root symbol. And then I just type in the number 9, and you can close the parentheses there. You don't have to close the parentheses. It'll calculate it anyway. And when I hit enter, which I hit the wrong button, so let me fix that real quick. All right, so then on the bottom here is the enter key, right? There's no equals button on the calculator. To see what something is equal to, you hit the enter key, right? So I hit enter down below, and it gives me 3, right? The square root of 9 equals 3. All right, so, and if you look on the buttons on the calculator, above all of these buttons, or almost all of these buttons, there's something written in blue, right? So to get to that stuff that's written in blue, you use that second key. All right, so the second key is almost like a shift key when you're using a computer keyboard, right? It gets you to the other thing that key does. All right, so that's using the second key to do a pretty simple thing in square root. Now we're going to do something practicing editing, right? Sometimes, especially when we type in a lengthier calculation, like the one in number 2 up here, -2 plus 3 times, parentheses 5 minus 2 plus 9. All right, sometimes when we type in something lengthy like that, we make a mistake. Right, I know my fingers are kind of big, so sometimes I try to hit a 5, but I hit the 5 and the 4 at the same time, and then it puts a 54 there instead of just a 5. Right, so we're going to talk about how to fix something if you make a mistake typing things in. All right, so I'm going to type this in, -2 plus 3, but I'm going to make a mistake. Instead of a 5 here, I'm going to type a 4, and then I'll show you how to go back and actually fix that. All right, so first thing, for a negative number, right, there's a key down here that has a minus in parentheses. And then there's also a minus key here, right, above the plus sign. Right? The one up here is for subtracting. The one down here, that little negative in the parentheses, is to type in a negative number. So if I want to type in -2, I have to use that little minus down here, not the subtraction key. I have to use the negative key down here. So -2, and then +3. So over here is the +3. And then parentheses. My parentheses key are up here above the 8 and the 9. Mine are a little worn out because I use them so much. But there's my open parentheses. And then, again, instead of 5 minus 2, I'm going to type it wrong and do 4 minus 2. All right, so when I do 4 minus 2, now I use the minus key over here, not the negative key down below. So I do 4 minus 2, close parentheses, and then +9. All right, so I typed that wrong. All right, so if I realize I typed that wrong before I type it in, what I can do is I can just use my cursor. The arrows up here move the cursor around, so I can just move the cursor back on top of that 4 and just type a 5 right on top of it, and it just replaces the 4 with a 5. right? So when you have the cursor as it is here with like a blinking square, it just overwrites whatever you already have on there. Right? So if you move that cursor on top of anything you typed in, it's just going to type right on top. It's not going to like squeeze it in between the stuff you already have. It's just going to type over top of it. All right, so now when I hit the enter key, now that I've typed this in correctly, I get 16. All right, so that's what all that stuff is equal to. All right, so that's how you can, fix something if you type it incorrectly. You just go over top of it and type over it. Right? What if it's a little more complicated? What if I, instead of the 5 here, what if I want to make that a 12? Well, that's going to be a little bit harder to do, but still doable. All right, so first off, I still have the thing I typed in up there. If I want to fix that thing that I typed in, like say I didn't notice I made a mistake until after I hit the enter key, you don't have to type all that stuff again. If you look above the enter key down here, in blue it says entry. Right? So to get that blue thing, remember, is the second key. So if I do second and then enter, it calls back up the last thing that I typed in, the last entry that I put in there. Right? So that gives me back the thing I typed in, and then I can go back and fix it to fix any mistakes that I made. Right? So now I want to change that 5 to a 12. Well, I can't just type over it like I did before when I changed the 4 to a 5, because the 4 and the 5 both had just one digit, so I could just replace the 4 with a 5. But now I want to replace the 5 with the 12, but the 12 has 2 digits. So if I try to just type a 12 here, right, the 1's going to go on top of the 5, but the 2 is going to go on top of the minus and take away that subtraction. So it's going to mess things up. So what I need to do here is first delete that 5. And if you notice, right next to that left arrow is the delete key. So I delete the 5, that gets rid of it. And then above the delete key, it says INS. That stands for insert. So I do second delete, and notice my cursor changes, right? From that dark square, now it's like a blinking line. That's how I can insert something in between. So now if I type in 12, it's not going to type on top of that minus. It's going to insert the 12 in front of that minus that I had there. All right, so now I can type that 12 in and hit enter, and now I get 37. All right, so that's how you can type over something when you need to really change it from, in this case, a 5 to a 12. You can delete and then use the insert, right, second delete, to fill things into the space in between without writing over top of what you already have. All right, so that is a couple things with editing, how to fix mistakes as you're typing stuff in. Let's take a look at doing some other more complicated types of calculations. Right, one thing to keep in mind is your calculator follows the order of operations. If you remember that, you probably learned it back in like middle school. PEMDAS, it does parentheses, exponents, then multiplying, dividing, and then adding and subtracting. And it will always do it in that order. Right? So if you want things to be calculated in a certain way, you need to like put parentheses in there if you want the calculator to do that part first and then put the other stuff in. Your calculator is very literal with the order of operations. And I hear students tell me all the time, I typed it in the calculator, but my calculator gave me the wrong answer. Your calculator gives you the answer to what you type in. If it's the wrong answer, it's because you typed it in wrong, not because your calculator made a mistake. Right? I've not ever yet seen a calculator actually do something wrong. It's always the person putting the stuff in that makes the mistake. Right? So to type this here, 11 minus 3 over 2. Right? So we can do that, most of us, in our heads. Right? If we do 11 minus 3, that's going to equal 8. 8 divided by 4 is going to give us 2. Right, but if I type it in the calculator, 11 minus 3 divided by 4, right, if I type it just like that, I'm expecting that the answer is going to be 2, but it gives me 10.25, right, which obviously is not 2. So what happened? Right, is my calculator stupid? It made a mistake? No, I typed it in wrong. Right, when I am doing something like this, and anytime I have a fraction that involves addition or subtraction in either the numerator or denominator, I need to wrap that subtraction in parentheses, right? I need to tell my calculator, subtract this first, right? Do 11 minus 3 first and get 8, and then take the answer to that, 8 divided by 4, to get the answer to what we're doing. All right, so if I type it in again with parentheses, and I'll show you what that looks like, right? So if I type in parentheses 11 minus 3 divided by 4, I get 2, which is what we expect. All right, so again, parentheses when you're typing in complicated calculations on your calculator is a very important thing to use, right? If you needed to do this subtraction before you do the division, you have to put that subtraction in parentheses, right? What happened the first time when I just typed 11 minus 3 divided by 4 without parentheses? Your calculator followed the order of operations, and in the order of operations, dividing comes before subtracting. So it did 3 divided by 4, and got 0.75, and then did 11 minus 0.75 to get the 10.25. All right, again, your calculator did it correctly. You just didn't type in what you wanted the calculator to do. All right, so that's one thing when you're dealing with fractions. The next one here, 3 plus 5 pi divided by 4 minus 6. Well, once again, we have a fraction here. This time we have addition and subtraction in both the numerator and denominator, which means when we type it in, we have to put parentheses around the entire numerator, and we have to put parentheses around the entire denominator. So this is going to have to be in parentheses, and then that's going to have to be in parentheses. Otherwise, our calculator is not going to give us the answer that we need. Right, so to type this in, I start with the open parentheses, which again are right up here above the numbers, so or right over these two. Open parentheses, and then 3 plus 5 pi. So 3 plus 5. Now for pi, right? Don't type in 3.14 for pi. Your calculator has a pi button, right? And that pi button is above the caret there for the exponent. So you have to do second and then that little exponent caret, and that brings in pi. And your calculator has pi stored to a lot of decimal places beyond just 3.14. So whenever you're doing something that involves pi, use that button. It's going to be a lot more accurate than just typing in 3.14. Right? And then divided by, and then parentheses again, 4 minus 6. And so my numerator's in parentheses, my denominator's in parentheses. I hit enter, and I get whatever answer I get for that calculation. All right, so again, with fractions, if you have addition or subtraction in your fraction, you need to put it all in parentheses. Right, next thing we have here, exponents, 3 to the 4th power. So if I want to raise something to a power, I type in the base number first, 3. Like we just saw with the pi, that little caret there that's up above the division key, right, that's our exponent key. So I do exponent, and then I type in the exponent of 4, I hit enter, and 3 to the 4th power equals 81. Right, so that's how you can do exponents, just by using that little caret key that's up above the other operations, right above the division key. All right, so that's 3 to the 4th power. The third root of 7, right? There's a couple ways to do the third root of 7. One way is by using the math menu. So the math menu is over here below the second and the alpha keys. It says math. So if you hit that math button, and then if you scroll down on the list, this gives you a whole bunch of other things that your calculator does that just don't fit on all these other buttons that are here. And that's what a lot of these menus do. So if I scroll down here to choice number 4, right, see it has the third root, right, the 3 next to that square root symbol. So I choose that one, and that gives me my third root, and then I type in 7, right, kind of like before when I did that square root problem, the first one, the square root of 9, right, the third root, though, is not one of the buttons on the keyboard. I have to go into that math menu to get the third root. So I do third root of 7, I hit enter, and the third root of 7 equals 1.9 something. We don't care so much about what these things equal. We're just practicing typing the stuff in the calculator here. So that's our third root of 7. All right, the next one, the square root of 4 squared minus 2 times 5. Right, so to do a square root, once again, that's above the x squared key. So I do second and then x squared to get the square root. And then I type in 4 squared. Right, so 4. And then to do something squared, I could do the caret with an exponent of 2, or I can just hit that x squared button that I just used. Right, that gives me a shortcut to the exponent of 2. So 4 squared minus 2 times 5. So you can do 2 and then 5 in parentheses, or you can just type in 2 times 5. All right, again, your calculator is going to do the order of operations. It's going to do the 4 squared, the exponent, before it does the multiplication of 2 times 5. But if all that stuff is wrapped in the parentheses with the square root symbol, it's going to do all that stuff and then calculate the square root of it, and we get that result right there. All right, and then the last one up here, 2 divided by the cube root of 2 plus 3 times 6. All right, so for this one, we're going to do this one kind of in steps. All right, so I'm going to first calculate what's in that denominator. So I'm going to do the cube root, which once again is the math menu, and then scroll down to choice 4. Hit enter. So the cube root of 2 plus 3 times 6. All right, which gives me that number right there. Right, 2.7144. I want to do 2 divided by that number. So there's a shortcut to doing that where I can do that next step without typing this whole thing in the calculator. I do 2 divided by, and then to use the answer from the last thing that I typed in, look above the negative key down here, it says ANS. That's for answer. So I do second negative, right? That's going to bring back that last answer, that 2.7144. I hit enter, and then that gives me the value of this whole big fraction over here, right? So I don't have to type the whole thing at once and take a chance of making a mistake, but it allows me to do it kind of in pieces and then just carry that answer forward to the next step. All right, so that's the first part of this calculator workshop. In the next one, we'll be looking at some statistical stuff that the calculator does, so make sure you check that out.